know, some folks will talk about the leftist progressive Democrats, the DSA, allegations of anti-Semitism. I think it's way overblown. The rising amounts of anti-Semitism are from some of these forces on the conservative right.
Well, I would say, I mean, I think J.D. Vance actually very clearly in an interview with Margaret Brennan disavowed Nick Fuentes, that he has no place in the conservative movement, and I hope we see him say more statements like that. But I would say there's a frustration that the media only seems to care about this when it's coming from the right. And I know we spoke about Graham Plattner last week, but since we spoke about him, the guy with the Nazi tattoo, Bernie Sanders has not distanced himself. The entire Democratic Party seems to embrace these people we were like Plattner, like Zoran Mamdani. I think they could probably do what we're seeing on the right.
Bernie Sanders had endorsed him and stood by him. We talked about that. But, I mean, I actually, to be honest, I'm going to push back on what you said, because I do think that this is not like only a right-wing thing, right? There is rising anti-Semitism, and it exists on both sides of the political spectrum right now, and you do have to acknowledge that. But I think the thing about conservatives, and in a way, I actually give the conservatives who have spoken out in this moment a huge amount of credit, because there are many of them who are drawing a bright line. But the conservative movement has been sort of shaped around condemning anti-Semitism on the left over the last 2 years, and then for them to just kind of brush it away in the form of Nick Fuentes because it's coming from Tucker Carlson, that is the part that I think is perplexing, because of how vehemently they have spoken out about anti-Semitism on the left in the last couple of years.
I feel like we've been having, and I'll just take it even a broader picture here, we've been talking about free speech, and we know it's not free. When you see something like that happen, and then you have someone come out and say, guess what, you know, fringe is now more center, and it seems to be okay. There are only so many worlds where you can do that. There is no way in today's media landscape that you were talking about that we could be on the opposite side of that and have that conversation without the right being up in arms. And so I do feel like there is only a certain conversation that is respected for a certain few that are allowed to have that conversation without there being any real pushback, and it's just disheartening. I don't feel as if you feel like you can speak freely in America anymore unless you are in agreement with those who have a Tucker Carlson, if you will, or someone who has a powerful audience, someone who has the ear of the president. And it's not fair in the world that we live in.
Yeah, look, I'll just say this real briefly, is that I do think there is some elements of anti-Semitism on the left. However, it is not the vast majority of the Democratic Party or progressives.
I don't think it's a vast majority of either party. It's not, but it's the question of who is policing the boundaries of the mainstream of both parties. And I think it's a challenge for both parties to say, yeah, some people not allowed in the tent.